Welcome back to Obsession Engineering and the fast RS660 project. With the engine back in the bike, we need to actually make it breathe. So we've connected all the top end stuff, the MWR air filter, the jet prime, bell mouths and bits, but we need an exhaust pipe. And that'll involve that box with an exhaust pipe in it. So while I've been doing the Aprilia, Rob has been off for a few days, but he's back in the workshop now. So if you hear things getting hit with a hammer and some swearing, that's Rob in the background. Also, we need to keep Rob employed, so if you need your track bike or road bike sorting, get in touch with us and we can get Rob onto it. This RS-V4 is having cartridges, K-Tech rear shock, some different clip-ons and some go faster bits thrown at it. And so Rob, our BSB mechanic, is on it. If you'd like to keep him employed, bring us your bike.
Please do.
So what is in the box? Well, it says on the side, it's a Spark exhaust system. I think we ought to get it out of the box and have a look. I like to do a dry build of the system on the bench just to make sure everything goes together nice and simply before you try and get it on the bike, because if you know all the bits fit, when you get it on the bike, if it's a little bit of a struggle, that's obviously just how it sits on the bike. And so everything's slipped together really nicely, which tells me that everything can be manufactured to a good standard. There's no distortion when they've welded it or anything like that. And interestingly, this Spark system goes two nice long headers, two nice primaries, into a collector and then tapers out into the link pipe into the silencer. The Arrow system that we normally run, that I've got on my bike, and the Acra system that quite a lot of other people run, has a silencer, sort of link pipe silencer, as it were. So the two headers go into a mid silencer, and that does two things. It helps break the power pulses up so you don't get scavenging out the other exhaust quite as much, and of course it makes the bike quieter. So it'll be really interesting on the dyno to see what this system does in comparison to the Arrow and Acras. We know what they do on this spec of engine, so getting this one on the dyno with its quite different design ethos will be really interesting to see how much power and how much torque we make. What I can report though is the build quality is lovely. Spark actually shot blast their titanium pipework, so it has this more matte finish, which I rather like. You can see the welding here. These very, very, very consistent welds, I would imagine, are probably machine welded. They'll be done on some sort of orbital welder, which is why they're really consistent. But then if we look on, say, this weld here, there's not quite the same consistency to it. So I would put money on this bit's being done by hand. It's still very, very nice. And what I particularly like about this is you get the nice sort of gold coming out in the actual weld, and then you just get a little bit of the colour as the temperature dissipates into the pipework. And it's just a little detail, but I think it looks really cool. Right, exhaust system fitted, and it all fits quite nicely. What I did notice was you actually had to pull the system a bit into place to get the bolt up into here, and to get the silencer and bits to fit, but it comes with all the little brackets and spacers. Apparently it also has a bracket for if you want to run it with the pillion pegs, which is a nice addition, but we don't want that. So that is on, it looks good, and it also means that now I can put the radiator in here, which will be another bit ticked off the list. Radiator refitted, but before I fitted the radiator, I fitted an Evotech radiator guard, and interestingly now, you can't really see them now, they come with these little rubber stoppers. And basically if you hit the radiator guard, the rubber stopper would hit the actual radiator before the guard, so it just gives it a bit of extra strength, because you don't want your rad guard flat against the radiator, because if anything hits it, it just punches through, which is not a lot of use to us. And the radiator guard is really nicely made, except for one thing, there's no actual bolting position for it, so you have to hold it on with cable ties, which is okay. I mean, it does the job, but I feel if those brackets just had a hole in them, you could actually bolt it to the bike, which would be considerably nicer. I also realised that we don't need the original quite chunky Aprilia bracket that held something else on that then held the radiator on, but Obsession Engineering reservoir brackets, originally designed to hold your brake reservoirs on, a 75mm one fit perfectly, and so that is a bonus. And if you want one or two or three or loads of them, you can check out obsessionengineering.co.uk, look in the shop area, and they're on there, along with other wonderful merch. With the radiator on, what I could do is rip even more of the front of the bike apart. Decided not to though. I've decided to do a slightly shorter job, and that involves coming down here. So I've taken the back wheel out, And if I'm honest, doing a wheel change on the Aprilia isn't the most straightforward thing. Just the angle of where the wheel sits, where the back of the belly pan tends to come to on the race bikes, and it's a little bit fiddly. And then of course at some point the caliper moves and everything falls in a heap when you try and change the wheel. So we're going to do a couple of little mods to make changing the wheel easier. And the first one involves an M4 screw. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill a hole through about here on the rear wheel spindle adjuster, and then we're going to drill and thread a little hole into the actual caliper hanger so that we can use this screw to hold the caliper hanger, this section, to the mounting block there, and so whatever happens, the caliper and hanger can't fall into the swinging arm when you're trying to change your wheel. To get the bolt hole as straight through the adjuster and into the caliper hanger as possible, what I did was I took the adjuster block off and I drilled that in the pillar drill because I know I could get the block nice and flat in the vise. Unfortunately, getting the caliper mount into the vise is an absolute pain because there's almost no flat surfaces on it big enough to clamp. So what I've done instead is used a piece of bar here, which is the same diameter as the spindle and easier to use, to hold everything in position, and then I've used this as the guide to drill into the caliper hanger so that when I tap the caliper hanger the screw hole is straight. Then I just need to drill this out to be clearance across the bolt. Everything should bolt together properly because if you get it at an angle it'll hold the caliper off slightly, and that makes it even more difficult to get your wheel in and out. So with the caliper now secure so it doesn't fall off while you're putting the disc in and out of the caliper, the next thing is to make the disc easy to go into the pads by just putting a little chamfer on the bottom of them, and that just means it's a little bit easier to get the pad started when you're pushing the wheel up into the caliper. And to keep the spindle located in the adjuster block on this side, the spindle is now the opposite way around, I've just drilled a few little holes and lot wide across it, and so the spindle stays attached to the block. Makes life a bit easier. While I had the wheel out, I thought it was a good idea to change the sprocket. This one's 43 teeth, the original's 43 teeth, but this one is 480 grams lighter than the steel one it comes with. And so that is a distinct advantage in unsprung weight, rotating mass, powered weight, so that is more than just a gearing change. Not that that one is a gearing change, but that one is, because we've gone from 17 to 16. So my sort of default gearing on these bikes is 1643. It works pretty much everywhere apart from, well, Northwest and TT really. I've also lock-wired the sprocket nut, the sprocket bolt even. Normally out the factory they've got a lot of Loctite on them, which is a pig to get out, and this Belvedere, whatever, belly thingy washer is sprung, so it shouldn't come undone, but when it's lock-wired it definitely can't come undone. And around the other side of the wheel we've changed the original bolts for titanium drilled race spec bolts. I mean, partly because they're bling, and partly because then I can drill lock-wire them together, so again, they can't come undone. Safety first. And the spindle nut has changed as well. The biggest reason for that actually isn't the bling. The standard one's very, very shallow, so it's really easy to round it off and have your socket slip. That one's basically double the width, and it's 27mm, not 26, so that just makes life easier. And saves a bit of weight. And looks a bit bling. But I know what you're thinking. Dave hasn't changed the chain tension. I haven't. But that's because that chain's coming off and a gold on gold Zabaki RQI chain is going on. Same chain we run on the superbikes. Absolutely mega quality. It'll do loads and loads of race miles. These standard ones, they're okay. Basically that one looks nicer and will be a bit stronger as well. For short circuit I run standard chain length, so the wheelbase is sort of in the middle. For TT I ran a link longer just because it stops the bike wheeling so much, because it might only be a 660 twin, but they do actually wheelie quite well. And so an extra link in the wheelbase just calmed them down a little bit, made them a little bit nicer to just ride flat out for longer. So onto the front end of the bike, and we've got a fair bit of work to do here, so it is going to be a good few hours. So we are having Spider lock stock set, Spider top yoke, Spider clip-ons. There's a note on that. The Spider top yoke and clip-ons were developed with Aprilia, and the clamps on the clip-ons are particularly small. They're quite narrow, so you still get a good like 8mm of adjustment on the fork height, and so that is definitely worth having. Right, so Spider top yoke clip-ons. We're having some fancy Jet Prime switches on it. We're also having a Jet Prime quick action throttle. There is going to be a Bitubo steering damper on, but also a Gabro air scoop and a dash protector. And so there is quite a lot to go on with this lot. So what I need to do first is strip the clock support air scoop out of it, because all the standard wiring runs into it. And then I can get to the connector that connects the front wheel speed sensor, which is down here, because usefully Aprilia didn't leave quite enough room for it to go through the hole in the bottom of the fork. So you can file a little bit out of the bottom of the fork to get the sensor through, or you can just disconnect it in here. And I need to disconnect all this anyway. So that's what I'm going to do. Clock binnacle off, all of the wiring out, and then we'll put it on a big paddock stand and take the front wheel and the forks out of it. So with the forks out of the Aprilia, it is time to take the standard internals out of them and put something considerably better in. Because this stuff's okay for road riding, but it's distinctly soft. And so what we want is better quality damping, more options on springs, and basically better and faster forks. When I built my bike, we went Bitubo. I like the feel of the Bitubo kit. I've got it in pretty much all of my bikes now. But Tim wanted K-Tech. One of his other bikes is on K-Tech, gives him a bit of consistency. And also, with having Finn Whedon's bike, British Championship, on K-Tech, we have a load of short circuit settings which should work pretty well. And these are not the really expensive pressurised DDS kits. This is the 25mm IDS kit. So what this is a 25mm piston, so 25mm shim stack, and the IDS is independent damping system. And so each leg has one of the dampers in it. So right leg will be rebound, left leg is compression, and what that does is just separates them out so you get more control of the oil and a bit more fine on the adjusters. So time to strip the forks down, take the standard stuff out, bolt these bits in. So a bit more overview of the advantages of the K-Tech cartridge, an aftermarket cartridge, versus standard. So the standard one, you probably could split it apart. You could probably change the shim stack in it and make the damping work a little bit better, but you're always going to be quite restrictive. And even if you could do that, you've got a smaller diameter inside the cartridge, so you're never going to get quite as nice a damping as you're going to get from the 25mm in the K-Tech. Obviously, by the time you've bought different shim stacks, altered the piston design, anything like that, and spent the time stripping and building it, you're getting surprisingly close to the cost of a cartridge kit anyway. Also, the Aprilia forks don't have a compression adjuster option. There's rebound adjustment and preload at the top, but there is no compression adjuster on the forks. And so with the aftermarket ones, you're going to get more adjustment. And interestingly, even the preload adjustment on the standard forks isn't a massive range, and so that adds a bit more awkwardness. And the last thing, the ease of changing springs is load quicker on the K-Tech. The aftermarket system, you can take the top cap off in pit lane, you can change the spring in a couple of minutes. The standard forks, you're going to have to take the forks out of the bike. It's a bit more of a pain, and you're definitely not going to be doing it on race day in the paddock. And with both fork legs now fitted with their K-Tech cartridges, it's time to go and threaten these near a motorbike. As is always the way that when it comes to reassembly, it took about 10 minutes to strip the whole front end out of the bike. We're now well over an hour in, and so far we've got the forks in. Or that's what it looks like, but there is a bit more to it. We've got Jet Prime lock stops. In the past I've made my own. The time it takes to make them, you may as well buy a set of Jet Prime ones at the hourly rate. Then there's a Jet Prime steering damper mounting bracket, so the damper will basically run from there to the bottom yoke. The only problem is where the paddock stand sits, I can't get the bolt in for the damper yet, so I can't fit that until we've got the paddock stand out. So that can wait. The air scoop is out because we're going to fit a Gabro air scoop and clock bracket, but I have fitted the Spider top yoke, top clamp, whatever you want to call it, and the RS660 specific clip-ons. We've also got a Spider clutch lever because when we fit the front brake master cylinder, that's already got one on it, and we've got a Hell finger brake, scooter brake, whatever you want to call it. It's a while since I've fitted a Gabro air scoop. Turns out, not as easy as I was hoping. So let's have a look. The idea of the Gabro air scoop is it's a much smoother tunnel of air, and so you get better, basically positive pressure into the airbox. The Aprilia system is a little convoluted, so I can understand the advantage. But the wiring loom needs to move to the outside of the air scoop, which means it needs to run on the outside of the frame, which means we have to take the airbox off we need to take some of the plastic cover off here so that the loom can basically go down that way above the radiator. Another slight issue though is the connector for the headlight doesn't fit. So you need to take the headstock out and slide it down so you can push the wiring loom into the right place before you put the headstock back in. So what I actually need to do next is get a car engine hoist, hook it round the frame and lift the bike off the paddock stand so that I can drop the headstock out so that I can move the wiring loom. That plug is going to cost some time. So the wiring loom used to run down the inside of the air scoop there, doesn't anymore. It's now tucked just above the fan, just above the radiator where the radiator mounts into the frame, so it's quite secure down there. But all the plastic housing that sort of protected the wiring loom isn't there anymore because you have to take that off. And so I've cable tied the wiring loom into place as much as I can, secured it up there. Yes, I do have some orange cable ties. Made sure the wiring loom behind the fan, behind the radiator, was also tucked in nicely so everything is neat and secure because we don't want anything fretting and vibrating. That has taken a while though. It's been throttle bodies off, undoing the wiring loom stuff has been a bit of a pain, rewrapping everything in electrical tape. It's given me a chance to tuck the lambda sensors that we're not using out of the way as well. So the next thing I need to do is put the airbox back on and then probably go home for a nice bit of dinner. There's more stuff bolted to the bike because I went home and I had some dinner and it was really nice. And now we're on to actually bolting things together, and I dropped in this morning and basically decided to just crack on and bolt stuff to a bike. None of it's groundbreaking if I'm honest. The Gabro air scoop holding bracket, like clock bracket, now fits and the loom all pulls up here. Turns out that bit of loom never actually has a cover on it, so I am going to tape that in a bit. So I've got the loom running in the correct location. I haven't put the air scoop in the bike yet because it's going to have to come back out again, sorry, when I've got the fairing, and the fairing should turn up in the next couple of days. And so until then, I don't actually need to put the air scoop in, but it does just slide in there later, and then we just screw it in place when we know the exact location. Right, Melotti dash protector. That is the nicest fitting dash protector I've used. I was quite impressed with how that fitted. And we've moved on to fitting switchgear and stuff as well. Quick action throttle, all the front end is torqued up. I've drilled the security bolt out of the ignition barrel and fitted the jet prime one, so we're push button now, we don't need a key, which is much nicer. And with the front paddock stand out, I've fitted the Bitubo steering damper. So that fits perfectly to the jet prime adapter kit. It's quite a compact damper as well, and so one of the issues on these bikes with the standard fairing is it sometimes in lock the end of the steering damper will hit the fairing. I'm confident this won't. Till we get the fairing we won't be able to test for sure, but we are actually making some reasonable progress on the bike now. And also today the postie has been and delivered the reg rec bracket, so I shall fit that in a little bit, and in the packet with that was also the sort of key surround airbox front in carbon as well. So thanks to Jolly's Carbon for sorting those bits out for us pretty quickly. Right, more progress being made. Must be time to bolt some more bits to it. These are not the calipers from the 660, but they are the calipers that are going on the 660. They are going to be somewhat belt and braces because the brakes on the 660 are pretty darn good anyway, but why would you not want even better? And to go another step, we're putting like castellated pistons in the brakes as well, so that they don't transfer heat into the caliper and they get rid of the heat off the caliper even better. So we've just got to put those pistons in the calipers and then we can fit those to the bike. To change the pistons in these calipers is particularly easy because you've got quite a lot of room where the pads sit. So I could get my piston pliers in, grip them and actually pull the old pistons out with those, and then I've also removed the dust seals because the bike will be kept clean. The owner is fastidious with cleaning things, so we don't need the dust seals in there, and again that just reduces a little bit of friction around the pistons, make the pistons move a little bit easier. And now we've got these little castellated stainless pistons in, so they're just going to aid cooling in the caliper and with the pad, and so apparently they improve pad wear and they definitely help stop heat going into the caliper. Again, not a massive problem on an RS660, but every little bit helps. Brembo calipers now fitted with some nice race spec drilled bolts as well. I like putting shiny bolts on because they just raise the game a little bit more. Right, the fluid will be delivered via some Hell braided brake hoses, so they run up here, and we've done a little bit of routing behind the steering damper and then across the yoke, and we've tied them in, sort of screwed it actually to the yoke via a clip so that it doesn't hit the steering damper bracket or anything like that. They are tied to the fork leg as well. We run the brake line around the outside so that it can't get trapped between the mudguard and the tyre. Just keeps it nice and safe and out of the way. Up at the top, that isn't the RS660 mass cylinder. That's an RSV4 mass cylinder because it's designed to go with those calipers, and so the two will work incredibly well together. The master cylinder supply on the other side is a little bit fiddly, and so we've got a longer bracket to hold a smaller reservoir, but that's tucked in so it doesn't touch the yoke and it doesn't quite touch the clutch slide bar. Sort of rubs on it, but it doesn't disturb it. And because all of it's attached to the handlebar, when you move the handlebar, it all goes together. The only game with this one though, it's an 8mm delivery pipe on this one, and I've had to warm the pipe up and put a little bit of a kink in it, so it doesn't actually fully kink the pipe, it's just put a couple of sort of little notches in it, I suppose, so that it actually goes around the corner there without crushing, kinking the pipe and stopping the brake fluid delivery. So it's been a little bit time consuming getting this side especially set up because, well, basically back brakes on your handlebars are always a bit of a faff because it's a busy area. But that's mounted. We then have a Hell brake line running across there, tying up into the clutch line as well, and down here, and we'll tidy some of the excess into the bottom of the engine, and then it will come down here through the back of the frame and run along the swinging arm like the standard one does, and when we finish we'll tie the wheel speed sensor to it as well, and down to the caliper. So that's it. We have all the brake stuff assembled on the bike. Don't have any fluid in yet. We are using Motul RBF 700, very high boiling point brake fluid, so we're going to fill the reservoir with that, and then down at the bottom we've got this jug with a vacuum system on it, and we're just basically going to suck the fluid through to the calipers because it's considerably quicker. So here we go, how to bleed brakes easily. I pull that, and it sucks the fluid out the reservoir bit by bit, and it saves me spending hours pumping away. And after only a few minutes of sucky and then a little bit of pumpy by hand, we have actually got a pretty good brake lever there. With both of the brakes now done, that scooter brake has come up really well, and the advantage of the Hell ones is they've got the bleed nipple on the mass cylinder in a sensible position. Some of the other makes don't have that, and it makes it considerably more difficult to bleed. So rear one's bled up, that is absolutely spot on. Overflow bottle for the radiator, that is a genuine HRC overflow bottle. I will admit I normally have cheaper ones in stock, but this one I bought in with a load of HRC stuff for the superbike and was on the shelf. So that's now fitted. So this is Aprilia HRC. Nice. I've put some Motul oil in the engine because it'll be needing that, and we've got actual antifreeze in the radiator. It is a race bike, but over winter it's going to be sat in a cool garage, so we don't want the option of it freezing over, and the antifreeze protects all the elements inside the engine, stops anything corroding, and so I always antifreeze race bikes over winter, and then before you use them, just give them a good flush through 2 or 3 times, get rid of any last trace of antifreeze before you go on track with them. So with all that done, reconnected the battery, I just need to put a fuel tank on it, then we can actually see if it starts, which would be kind of useful. Ignition button on. I have already had it spinning over on the starter, and I've changed this into the race dash. No real reason to do it, but I wanted to. Well, it's running, and on 2 cylinders, and it's not especially loud. This is a good start. It is a little bit smoky though because we've been cleaning stuff with sprays, so yeah, I might turn the fans on. Had the bike outside, had a full run up to temperature, so the fans come on and off a couple of times, and yes, the fan is still on it for the half a kilo it weighs. I think having that option when you're set in a holding area after racing the bike's hot to just have the fan running is not a bad idea. And so fan is still on. Right, now the bike has cooled down, checked the fluid levels, they're all happy days, done a few extra little bits, put the mudguard back on it, put a sticker on it, because who doesn't like stickers? Right, Gabro air scoop is in. When the fairing arrives, this will have to come back off and be trimmed to fit in the fairing. Intake air pressure, I think it's actually a temperature sensor, and I've just mounted that so it actually reads in the air scoop. That is for the headlight illuminator, which will turn up at some point. Go around the other side, other little jobs, put the colours on the buttons. Doesn't really matter, and especially with these ones because they're basically, we're going through the menus more than anything, so I've made them match another bike the customer has. The ones on the back are up and down for traction control. I've colour coded them: green for more traction for safety, red for less traction for fun. You can't see them, but it makes sense to have them labelled that way anyway. Right, anything else? Have I forgotten anything? Reg Rec is now mounted on the Jolly's carbon bracket, so that's nice and neat and keeps everything out of the way. And that's it. We have got down to the point of doing little fine details. These things can take quite a lot of time, but they have to be done right. Oh yes, I fitted the rain light, but I'm waiting for the switch to turn up so I can actually wire it in. But that's there. Battery is secured in the battery tray. Power commander is on top of it. Lots of little bits. They all take a few minutes, but it's worth doing everything right, taking that extra little bit of time. So we are down to the last few details on the fast RS660. It needs to go on the dyno for the last little bit of running in, and more importantly to get it mapped so it's got the right fuel map for that spec engine. We do of course need to fit the bodywork. I need to find a lever guard for it, a couple of tiny little details, but this thing is not far off ready. So thank you for watching, and join me again next time for some more Aprilia action.